Okay, let's go ahead and move on. Krystal, I don't want to take too much of a victory lap. Unfortunately for myself and for the entire world, I was right. Let's go ahead and put this up there on the screen. The Justice Department will be appealing the travel mask mandate after the CDC says masks will still needed on public transportation. They just won't give this one up, Krystal. They are
did it in the
demanding.
dumbest possible way, too.
Yeah, they really did, which is they were like, well, we need to appeal the mask mandate because we need to preserve the ability of the CDC to make all public health decisions. Here's the thing with the CDC. They have never been a organization that makes law. Their job is to issue a public health advisory, not to set national policy. So for example, we've talked about this. CDC says that you should cook all your meat to 160 degrees internal temperature. How many people out there like rare steaks? Every time you do, you are doing it in violation of CDC guidance. We take their advisory. Sometimes we abide by it. Maybe if you're at a sketchy burger place. The other times, you're like, hey, I have confidence in my ability and I'm going to make free choices for myself. So they can issue an advisory, but they are saying that the CDC's basic authority was trumped over, and thus the Justice Department is acting on that behalf.
Well, the part that irritated me was how the administration was clearly all over the place.
Right, I was about to get to that.
Yeah, we can go to D3 because I think this is like so ridiculous. So at 1, Jen Psaki was like, we would advise all Americans to wear masks on airplanes. Then at 2, Joe Biden himself said wearing a mask is up to individuals. And then at 3, the HHS secretary was like, we're likely going to appeal the federal ruling striking down the mask mandate. And they did it in this weird way, too, where they were like, we're not going to decide. We're going to leave it up to the CDC what they want to do. And then ultimately, so if you genuinely feel like either, this is really important for public health, okay, then you appeal the ruling. Or if you feel like this is an infringement on, the federal government's ability to promulgate rules based on their authority granted to them by Congress, then in that case, too, you would appeal. So it was sort of weird that they were like, DOJ defer to CDC and we just want hands off, which I think reflected the fact that inside the administration, there was a fierce debate over what exactly to do here, because politically, you still have a majority that supports the public transit mask rule. But the people who are most animated about it are the people who are opposed to it.
Also, I can tell you, I flew over the weekend. I would say 80% people on the planes not wearing masks. Maybe 90, actually, even in the airports. On the plane itself, it was like, about 20% of the people were wearing masks. So that's just my experience over the weekend, and that was literally the day of the mask mandate getting struck down. Small, obviously, sample group. I think this is revenge of the bureaucrats. I think that the bureaucrats inside the CDC and Fauci and them specifically could not take the idea that the mask mandate was struck down and that they don't get to decide that. You saw a little bit of a preview from Fauci himself in one of his first and probably only appearances on CNN+. Let's take a listen.
Great content.
Both surprised and disappointed, because those types of things really are the purview of the CDC. This is a public health issue. And for a court to come in, and if you look at the rationale for that, it really is not particularly firm. And we are concerned about that, about courts getting involved in things that are unequivocally public health decisions. I mean, this is a CDC issue. It should not have been a court issue.
CDC issue. So I think this is ludicrous. It's not a CDC issue. It's up to the president. The president can take the advisory of the CDC and then make policy. And in that vein, it actually is a court issue because executive action is under the purview of the federal judiciary.
Well, that's what I was going to say is, you do hear a lot from the right about like unelected judges and making law and whatever. And it is that's our whole system of check and balances is, there can be tension between trying to figure out what is the purview and authority of the executive branch, the legislative branch versus the judiciary. And so, I don't just like dismiss out of hand, it's ridiculous that the CDC would think that they have some authority granted to them by Congress. So I don't think that that's the big problem here. To me, though, the issue is the sort of meta issue is that you know, you have this whole direction in politics of basically value-free. We're just going to outsource our thinking and outsource our principles to the bureaucrats.
Yes.
We're going to let the Pete Buttigiegs of the world with their spreadsheets crunch the numbers, and we don't have to do any real thinking for ourselves. We don't have to do any real governing for ourselves. We don't have to weigh competing values and competing priorities. We're just going to let the number crunchers ultimately decide. And that's exactly what they did here. I'd respect it more if the White House just directly came out and said, no, we think number one, we weigh the risks as more important than the benefit of being able to not wear a mask at this point, and here's the data that backs that up and why we value that over being able to, you know, choose whether or not you wear a mask. And here's what we think about our authority and why we want to preserve the ability to, next time there's a pandemic, require people to wear masks in public places. I would respect it a lot more if they actually owned it and gave their own reasoning rather than saying like, we don't know. We'll just let Fauci and the CDC ultimately decide.
On the science, I don't think they can do that. Because look, the only way it would really be efficacious is this. Everybody strap an N95 to their face the entire time that you're on the plane. That's not the policy. You're already using this, you know, cloth mask that you get to pull down whenever you're drinking and eating.
Magically, when you're having your pretzels on the plane, suddenly COVID doesn't matter anymore.
Mask policy on planes has been fake mostly forever, and also especially since Omicron. So, like I said, if you are afraid and if you find yourself immunocompromised, or if you're fat, obese, you don't want to get vaccinated, whatever, strap an N95. Don't take that sucker off one time. Although I do love this. When you're over at TSA and you have to give them your ID, they're like, pull your mask down. Every single time one of these things happens, you're creating a vector through which it could spread, only showing you even more that it is theater. It is absolutely indefensible whenever it comes to the science of it, which is fair. And that's why I find it ridiculous from the first place. So we either have an absolutist policy like China, guess what, we don't live in China, or we have to let people leave it up to themselves. Funny part, I was telling you on the phone, on the planes now they have to say, okay everybody, masks are optional, please respect the decision of your neighbors. So telling the Karens, don't freak out. Previously, it was the people before who were extremely annoying and didn't want to wear masks that are the problem. Now we have the opposite issue.
Yeah, I'm sure we'll see tons of like cringe content around that of like.
Everybody put your headphones in and leave your neighbors alone. I don't understand you.
Yeah, I mean, I guess the one reason that I could see the appeal as being justified is preserving that ability to be able to institute public health regulations in the next pandemic. Because I agree with you on the science. Like at this point, with how contagious Omicron is, with the wide availability of vaccines
and therapeutics,
and the fact that it is, you know, cloth mask or whatever, anything goes, and you can basically take it off for as long as you sort of sip and nurse at your drink. It really is more theater than actual science at this point.
Complete BS.
Cable news is ripping us apart, dividing the country, making it impossible to function as a society, and making it impossible to know just what is true and what is false. But the good news is they are failing and they know it.
That is why we're building something new, a new mainstream, a healthier one, something more trustworthy, something that we are going to need in one of the most pivotal times in American history. We are building up here for the midterms, for the upcoming presidential election, but we need your help. So if you can help us out by becoming a premium member today at breakingpoints.com, we're trying to change America for the better and the entire world.
So what are you waiting for, guys? Go to breakingpoints.com and sign up and help us build a new mainstream.